Liberals, that's who. Antifa, that's who. They bring their kids to a protest. This ruined the czar. I told you guys I would slaughter everyone. And I still stand by that. That's probably what I would do. You know, if you don't, what are you going to do? You know, I mean, you can negotiate, you can play the game, but at the end of the day, some people got to die. You got to teach some people some lessons. But what this did is, you know, he used his own army on his own people, and that's something that citizens look at as unforgivable. And these Russians aren't like regular people. The French would have wet their hands if the king started killing people. I'm telling you. They're a bunch of pansies. Their skin has a yellow streak right down the middle of their spine. The French do. I'm telling you. History shows it. They'd be speaking German if it wasn't for us in France. They need to sit down and shut up. Don't talk about us. They don't need to talk about the United States. Russians, on the other hand, you ever meet a Russian and they want to fight you? Go away. Don't fight them. You do not want to get in a fight with a Russian, like a real Russian. Not somebody that says, I got Russian in my blood, but somebody that's a Russian and you can tell they're Russian when they're talking. Don't fight them. I'm doing you a favor. Don't fight them. Unless you know exactly what the heck you're doing and you can ground fight. You can, don't fight them. They're the most rugged, toughest, ornery, nastiest people you want to roll with, like in that situation. I'm not saying they don't bleed, and I'm not saying they don't get knocked out, choked out, stabbed, killed, whatever. I'm just telling you, collectively as a group, there's not many nations of people on earth that are tougher. You got to remember that a lot of those independent nations of Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania were all part of this group at that time. The people's trust and faith in the Tsar was shot. The Tsar was as good as people were joining in with these revolutionary type groups. They weren't calling themselves communists yet. But this was a massacre according to the people. And the people basically gave up on the Tsar. Even those people that had said, I don't like a lot of things, but he's still my Tsar and I'm going to be a loyal Russian, and those people even switched sides. There were more strikes in the streets every single day that were farther away from the capital would actually take over the city government. Nobody with no army there to stop them. There were assassinations of government officials, i.e. noblemen, and people celebrated in the streets. Things were getting out of hand. They were on the verge of a revolution, and Tsar Nicholas had to do something to stop the hemorrhaging. He had to put a tourniquet on it, right? That's what you do when you're desperate, right? A tourniquet, that's your last resort. Because when you put a tourniquet on, you're cutting that limb off, right? That's like the medical, right? You guys know that. When you put a tourniquet on somebody, you don't put it on because you don't take it off. Once it's on, that's it. You're doing it to save their life. So he allowed the creation of a legislative body called the Duma. He gave out freedoms like it was Halloween and trick-or-treaters at his door. He promised them freedom of fear. He promised them freedom of speech and the freedom of press and the right to assemble. You just gave all the people that want to kill you the freedom to meet freely and trash you in the papers and trash you in public and gather more and more friends and allies on their side. And he did it as a tourniquet. I'm going to smooth it all over. I made a mistake. I'm going to smooth it all over. Let this Duma come together and start talking about all the things that we need to fix. And then we'll manage that later. Problem was, it didn't fix very long because at the very first meeting of the Duma, they all started criticizing the government. One by one, they're standing up. They're not trying to get any work done. It became the first meeting of the Duma became slaughter the Tsar Day. It was like, the Comedy Central roast of Nicholas Romanov II. Instead of just made fun of, it's the Tsar. He wasn't taking it. He wasn't even there. But that's what the meeting was. They might not have gone that crazy with him there, but they literally were just shredding him and his leadership. So immediately, the Duma gets shut down. Well, so much for that smoothing it over. Tsar Nicholas sends his right-hand man, his new prime minister, Peter Stolypin, out to start figuring out what we're going to do. And then he had started employing his own father. So he's all over the place. He's giving away the kitchen sink. He's giving them everything but the kitchen sink to get them to make them happy. Then, after consulting and finding out they did exactly like my dad said. You give them anything, they try to take everything from you. Then he practiced his dad's philosophy of repression. So he gave them a bunch and then he slaughtered them. He used the secret police, rounded up all of his enemies, had them shipped off to Siberia, and he had these people found, and there were people that were hung. You guys ever heard of Vladimir Lenin? Vladimir Lenin was the first communist dictator of Russia. In the Soviet Union, he created communism. His older brother got executed at the Tsar's orders during this time period. And then eventually he got solved again. So it was like he was back and forth, man. It's like a roller coaster, up and down, up and down. By 1914, he was still in power. He had survived from 1905 to 1914 after that Bloody Sunday by playing the game that all monarchs do. Give them a little bit. When they abuse it, take it away. Round up your enemies, throw them in jail. And that's basically what he'd been doing. They were still an autocracy. In other words, they were still a monarchy like they had been. They were still a monarchy like they had been. But they were ripe for a revolution. The conditions were right. Now, here's the last slide right here. This, you don't have to write this down, but you might want to be familiar with this because this is how I'll ask the question on the test. How did the Tsar react to the Bloody Sunday protests? Well, he reacted by sending his soldiers out there and they killed all of them. They didn't kill everybody, but you know what I mean. They came out, opened their guns, and fired their guns on their own citizens. What consequences did that have? Well, and you could say, well, the protest ended. Everybody went home. Protests were over. You could say that, but what we're talking about is the deeper ones. The citizens turned on him. Nicholas Romanov, although there were still people that believed in him and he was a beloved leader, more and more people had turned on him. His time was numbered. His days were numbered at this point. Protesters lost the respect. Your job of your leader of your country, the king of your country, is to provide for the needs of the people and to protect them. He wasn't providing for their needs. He had failed at every turn, and now he was using his own soldiers to kill his people. Those are the first two things that the leader of a country or a government is supposed to do. You fail those, then the people have the right to not obey your laws and even the right to find a new government. And in a democracy, they find a new government in the voting booths. In a monarchy, they find a new government at the end of a blade or at the end of a rope. Yep. Or in this case, at the end of a rifle. That's how they kill him. But we're going to talk about that another day. But you definitely want to know what the Tsar did. Remember I asked that question in the Enlightenment? Did Louis and Marie Antoinette contribute to their own downfall? Same thing here. I could ask you the exact same question. Yeah. Or how did the Tsar contribute to his own death? No other slides. I know they're getting ready to send it. Isn't it at 2:16? 2:16. We're having a 14-minute pep assembly. It starts at 2:20. All right, so they're going to start calling us that. I do have a little bit of a clip. Is there anybody that's copying any of that? If there is, I'll hold. Everybody's good? And I'm going to show you a little bit of this beginning of this Russian Revolution. It's going to reinforce a lot of what we've already talked about. So here we go. I want your eyes on this. This is actually good. This is from the British Broadcasting Corporation. It's a quality production. And there's actual real footage. Oh, he does that. 1881, St. Petersburg. The cool thing about this is there actually is some footage from the late 1800s of Russia and the Tsar in film, not just pictures, but some film.
The Tsar Alexander II is on his way to his army's military roll call. He's traveling in a bulletproof carriage gifted to him by Napoleon III. It had proved necessary as the Tsar had faced numerous assassination attempts during his reign. Everybody wanted to get rid of the Tsar and his government, but the fact that in the middle of the 19th century you had two inventions, the revolver and high explosive dynamite, both of which were widespread in Russia, which enabled quite amateur people to get together and organize
was an assassination.
This is really a sustained terrorist campaign. There are multiple attempts on the life of the Tsar, attempts to blow up his carriage. One terrorist, over a period of months, working as a carpenter in the Winter Palace, manages to plant a bomb of explosives which very, very nearly kill Alexander II at 11. It's sort of one of those moments where he was in the wrong room at the right moment, as it were, and the explosion does miss him.
That's Alexander II,
But this time,
Nicholas's grandfather.
He's so fortunate. Alexander's legs are shredded, his stomach cut open. Into Palace, where his family, the Romanovs, who have ruled Russia for nearly 3 centuries, are horrified to lay their eyes upon him.
He only lost 90 minutes, and the bomber himself also lost 90 minutes. His legs were blown off too.
The assassination of Alexander II, it's kind of Russia's 9/11. I've read newspaper reports that come out in the days after the assassination, and they are astonishingly graphic about the physical damage inflicted on Alexander's body. And they sort of start talking about the shattered legs and the tendons hanging out. So what they're describing is this wound that has been inflicted on the body of the state. So the king's 2 bodies were clearly there.
The group responsible for this attack is Narodnaya Volia, the people's will. The conspirators will be hanged for their crimes, but the movement would continue, and it would soon attract the attentions of one Alexander Ulyanov, eldest son of the Ulyanov family, and elder brother to Lenin, the man who would eventually eliminate the Romanovs completely. But in the people's will's predictions do not come to pass. There is no great revolution following the death of Tsar Alexander II. He's succeeded by his son, Alexander III, who, upon viewing his dying father, vows to never let the same fate befall him. Despite the enormous unrest, Russian autocratic rule would continue.
Alexander III considered Alexander II way too weak, and he liberated the serfs. So Alexander III decided to come down hard on Russia, and he was anyway a very forceful character who used to bend forks in knots at the table, and he apparently was able to walk through doors without opening them. He was a huge man, and undermined his son, unfortunately, by calling him girly when the Tsar was a child. And I don't know that the Tsar, Nicholas, ever emerged from that repression from his father, and that sort of undermining.
Alexander III has a very bad press. It's a stagnation, reaction. And all that is true. On the other hand, there were some good things about Alexander III. He never declared war on anybody. Unlike Alexander II, who was extremely aggressive, he warred the Turkish Empire, on the Chinese. He also listened to his ministers. He never gave a reaction to the conscious, very confident ministers. And in his reign, Russian railways became one of the best service in Europe. Russian post office too. It was boring now. You like the bottom, but things to say.
It seems sort of counterintuitive, but Russia is actually a fantastically dynamic society in lots of ways in its period. Really, once defeating the Crimean War in the 1850s, it understands that it has to industrialize if it is to remain competitive on the international stage. So the defeat of the Crimea at the hands of the French and the British laid bare the fact that Russia was an undeveloped state. Its peasant armies were no match for the Western powers. And so if Russia wants to remain in the game, it needs to industrialize.
Russia was modernizing at an extraordinary rate, but its political system remained deeply autocratic, unlike almost all other European nations of the era.
So the conditions of Russia at the time, normal middle-class families weren't allowed any form of political expression at all. That was the main problem. So any normal middle-class family, the son would have entered the revolutionary, the radical political set.
There was a wave of repression against Russian radicals, oppositionists, and so on. Some of these people are clearly dangerous. Some of these people have plotted to kill the Tsar and also the imperial family, or regional governors and so on.
There's a general paradox that a dictatorship, as long as it's strict and severe, is safe. When it starts to liberalize, it it gives an inch, and the people take a yard. Once the people detect the weakness or division, then hoarding starts to fall apart.
One such person who got caught up in this radical world was Alexander Ulyanov, known to his family as Sasha. He was the eldest Ulyanov son, an elder brother to Vladimir Lenin.
The Ulyanov family was not a typical family. There was a very small caste of civil servants in Russia, and the father was an inspector, and he reached a position in the civil service that gave him the rank of a noble. That was a very, very small percentage of people in Russia, but they weren't that rich.
Lenin himself grew intellectually, covered in gold medals from school and university, and he joined his student group and we decided to make a bomb. And that's what Alexander III.
So makes it scream now good.
The plan is to assassinate Alexander II's heir, Alexander III, where Alexander III is going to be attending a ceremony to commemorate the assassination of his father. And Alexander Ulyanov, he's the kind of monster war maker.
The people were also listed ideological association.
It was up here.
Down the very top. They're like so terrified that the system will disintegrate and there'll be a sort of peasant uprising out of which a new will arise. But they've begun to read Marx. The trouble with reading Marx, of course, is Marx predicted the last place of the revolutionary Russia. So it was still that romantic idea, kill the Tsar, and everything will naturally reform.
The bomb that's packed with pieces of metal that have been dipped in strychnine to inflict maximum number of fatalities, and that's worth remembering. But the plan is undone by the Okhrana, and they have wind of the attempt on the Tsar's life, and the terrorists are arrested and rounded up in Matrix.
Of course, they were expected to get. Alexander III very generously said, those that repent, I will reprieve. Those that don't repent, I will hang. Sasha said, I've been going against my principles, so after reprieve. His mother begged him to the hanging of Sasha. That is often seen as what Britain could do.
Often these things are personal, not political. When his brother was arrested, his mother rushed to the city. Vladimir, the future Lenin, tried to organize transport to get her to the nearest train station, and he traced around bourgeois St. Petersburg to try and get someone to go with his mother. Actually, all of them refused. And that changed his entire perspective about bourgeois and liberals and the other middle class, and that was overnight. And from then on, he just abused the liberals, and the way the family was snubbed because of this changed him as much as any of the politics.
Sasha Ulyanov was hanged on the 20th of May, 1887.
I'm okay.
And just like Sasha, Lenin would be tracked by the secret police of the Russian Empire, the Okhrana.
Boomer.
But Russia was the first one that had an entire massive organization to suppress
Why'd you do gesture?
Had a French lot as well. Keeping an eye on themselves.
always keeping an eye on them and telling
Danny, turn around. April, take your headphones out of your head.
So he spent 16 years effectively going from one bolt-hole to another, always one step ahead of his secret police. One of the biggest influences on Lenin, before he read Marx, was a novel by a guy called Nikolai Chernyshevsky called What Is to Be Done. It's a pretty lousy novel, but the hero is a selfless, devoted revolutionary who gives himself up to the cause and walks 20 miles a day, does 150 press-ups, abstains from alcohol, and he models himself on this character, Rakotev, quite deliberately. Lenin always said this book, which he read one summer 5 times, influenced him more than anything by Marx.
Lenin was forced to cover his tracks as he travelled around the country, trying his best to avoid the attention of the authorities. At the same time, Nicholas, the heir to the throne, was also on his travels around the Russian Empire and beyond. It was a voyage of great fanfare, but it came to a shocking end in Japan.
His father tried to give him some responsibility. He decided it wouldn't do any harm to put him in charge of the Trans-Siberian Railway. So he crossed Siberia, went all the way to Vladivostok, and then he was sent on a mission to Japan, which ended disastrously because Nicholas was suddenly attacked by a Japanese policeman who were tons of who took out his saber and slashed him in the head. And actually, because they were rather damaged.
Honestly, as far as I could see, it was a bit of a one-off. I didn't feel that it was a movement amongst the Japanese against the Tsar. I think the Japanese themselves were horrified by it.
Japan had only been open to Europeans for about 35 years, and there was a general xenophobic suspicion. This Japanese policeman thought himself as a samurai defending Japanese honor. Nicholas could be very well, he just stood there smoking, refused even to sit down. But in fact, the last part of his skull had been cut out, and he suffered from headaches ever afterwards. And it may well have prejudiced him against the Japanese, because after that, in his correspondence, he refers to the Japanese as macaques, as monkeys. And he became convinced that they were utterly inferior to the Russians and therefore could easily be conquered in any future war.
The Otsu incident may have been a near miss for the Romanov family, but it was a foreboding of things to come. Just a couple of years later, Tsar Alexander III would suddenly fall ill. He passed away at the age of just 49, leaving behind his thoroughly unprepared son Nicholas to inherit the throne.
Alexander died fairly unexpectedly of kidney disease when he was still in his 40s. I mean, Nicholas had expected to have another 20 years to prepare for this onerous responsibility, ruling this enormous empire.
The problem was with succession. This was the problem with the hereditary monarchy. The monarch has to die at the right time. When Alexander III died, and he was only 49, his minister said it was a pity he didn't die much earlier. So we had a boy Tsar who couldn't make any decisions for at least 10 years, or much later, so that Nicholas could have grown up a bit. But Nicholas was always somewhat infantile.
He was terrified when his father died at the prospect of having to take on so much responsibility for which he had really received very little training.
Just a week after his father's burial, Nicholas married Alex of Hesse, a German princess who would become Tsarina Alexandra. Her background would prove challenging for the Romanov family during World War I. But Nicholas's enormous problems as monarch started far sooner than that. In fact, from the day of his coronation, he was off to a dreadful start.
At his coronation in Moscow in 1896, and a big park called Khadimka in western Moscow, and the government had arranged for coronation markers and for bags of goodies to be given out. The fencing and the gates were all wrong, and so when the crowds pressed to receive their goods, there's a terrible crush. Some 1,500 people died. That was a terrible tragedy.
That night, there was a party at the French embassy, and he didn't want to go to it, but he was persuaded to go to the event, and it was forever held against him as deeply
I don't know.
insensitive.
Are we just going over there?
We had to
Yes.
Yeah.
just to advise him.
All right. Hold on.
What? Let's see if this can still come.
See you, Brandon. See you, my friend.
Two views. This is wrong. No. The end with you. What? Yeah. Or not. This is back to my channel, guys.